Hey guys, Dr. Mark here. Wanted to get on the, I was going to say on the telly. This might as well be the television because it's similar. But anyways, wanted to get on today to talk to you about your little ones and their heads and what should happen and how we can tell if it didn't happen and what we can do about it. So, it is no secret that when babies are born, there are a ton of transitions they're going to. They went from being able to hear, smell, touch mom 24 hours a day. They come out into the world and they have to figure out the rest of it. So, in the first year of a baby's life, their spinal column is growing. It grows 50% of its length. There are a ton of changes that are going on when baby comes out into the world and starts to crawl and sit and walk and roll over and grasp things and all of those things. So, wanted to talk a little bit because you can all picture a baby that we've seen that has maybe a flat spot, or it's very obvious that there's a bulge on one side. And if this is your baby, you maybe have wondered what the heck that you can do about it. Babies are no different than adults. Physical trauma is one of the components that we all have to deal with on a day-to-day basis. You might be wondering what kind of physical trauma would a baby have to encounter. Well, first and foremost, with a baby, it's going to be their position during pregnancy. So if they are breech, if they are transverse, if there are twins, if there's any sort of constraint in the womb, babies are going to be scrunched in tight, okay? Number 2 is any sort of birth process.
Hi. Sorry, I had to get my water.
Oh, how dare you. If there are any sort of trauma, and there she goes. If there is any sort of trauma during that birth process. So, forceps, vacuum delivery, C-section, anything where they are yanking, cranking, twisting, pulling to get baby out. And nowadays, actually, I shouldn't even say nowadays, even a normal, a healthy, gentle birth still puts a ton of pressure on a baby. So physically speaking, when a baby goes through the birth canal, they go through what's called a blowout. So we have a blowout of cranial bones, and then we also have a blowout of the lungs. So when babies go through the birth canal, first and foremost, the bones in their head are not fully fused. And so they partially overlap to allow them to come through the birth canal. Similar thing happens in our chest. So babies are floating around in amniotic fluid, and so as they come through the birth canal, things are compressed, and then they enter the world, and the suction, well, it's essentially suction, pushes all the garbage out of their lungs. We're not talking about that. Today we're just talking about the cranial bones. So when babies' cranial bones kind of partially overlap each other, they come out into the world, and in an ideal cases, they shift back into place. What happens sometimes, for whatever reason, is these cranial bones get stuck, okay? What's the problem with these stuck cranial bones? Well, first and foremost, your brain sits up top here in your skull, right? And there are different kinds of nerves that we have in our body. The first being cranial nerves, the second being spinal. And a lot of people relate spinal nerves to chiropractic because spinal nerves are going to be those that they're a direct extension of the brain, but they exit the skull through the spinal cord. And then they travel down and then go to the different places wherever they need to. The heart, the lungs, the arms, the feet, reproductive organs, the whole gamut. Cranial bones are the other chunk that I mentioned. The really cool thing about cranial bones is they are direct extensions of our brain, and they come out in different places all over our skull. So when we have those cranial bones that overlap and kind of stick and meld, it directly affects our cranial nerve function, okay? So how would you know if your little one is experiencing that? Well, first of all, they're not going to be very happy. They maybe aren't sleeping well, they've got tummy issues, immune system just is tanked, because those different nerves coordinate all of those functions. Another easy test you can do this at home. If you have a soft tape measure, and this is going to be backwards, I apologize. If you have a soft tape measure, we've got our little baby doll here. So what you do is you're going to measure from what they call the anterior fontanelle. So if you think of like right between your eyebrows, unless you're like 7th grade me and you don't know how to wax or tweeze, and so you've got one that grows over here and the other one's way back here, then it's not halfway in between your eyebrows. That's just a little humor for you. What you do is you measure in between baby's eyebrows. It's called a glabella. You're going to take your tape measure, and this might be tricky with one hand. Take your tape measure. Maybe this is going to be impossible with one hand, I don't know. And you are going to measure around to the back of that knob that's on the very back of your head. So let's see if our baby has one. Not really. It would be to here. So you're going to measure side to side. You're going to do the left first and then the right. Ideally, in a perfect world, those measurements should be the same. That tells us that those cranial bones blew out to where they need to go. If that measurement isn't the same, that's a pretty good indicator that there's some dysfunction in those cranial bones. So what can you do about it? The really cool thing about chiropractic is that it works with the nerves directly. So then the cranial bones shift as a side product, as a side effect. It's good. So we work with the nervous system, and then the bones do what they should, because the nerves direct the bones, direct the muscles, they direct everything. So far and away, if you have a little one with a misshapen head, with a flat spot, if you do this measurement at home and you notice, holy mackerel, their sides, their measurements aren't equal,